Don DeBar. Don DeBar was doing the morning news. He too was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to put together a news, and he didn't get paid for it. Good. He did it as most of us who are at the station, who've been there for a long time. We do things because they need to be done. If there's no news, we find out what we can do to get news. If there's no money for a different project, a certain project that we feel is important, we do what we have to do to get money to support that project. So, Don DeBar.
I'm going to make quickly at the beginning reference to what Mimi was speaking about and also what Bill was speaking about by giving you just a small piece of my own recent experience. Bernard and Errol Maitland and Sharon Harper had asked me to help out with the news. Wake-up call, lost a paid news person a ways back. There were some volunteers that were doing morning news. Everyone that knows anything about radio knows that when people turn the radio on in the morning, very often that's where the radio stays for the balance of the day. And when people turn the radio on in the morning, they want to hear news, weather, time, what's going on in the neighborhood. And there was no news on Wake Up Call, which hurt the program. And the best program on the radio in New York City and perhaps in the United States in the morning. But there was no fundamental thing. So they had Leslie George doing it for a while, and then Mitch Jesserich, who did a fantastic job. And then there was no one again. Bernard and Sharon and Errol asked me if I would help. They had 2 interns, 2 young women, and we were going to split up the week, the 4 days. Mario was doing his own. So I volunteered to do that. I got in first for 2 days. Then one of the interns dropped out, and I was doing 3 in about a year, 14 months or so ago. I ended up doing 4 days, and within the last 4 or 5 months, I went to 5 days, which entailed getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to pull down all the information that you can, try to parse it, and write a script, record it, and have it down at the station over the internet by 6 o'clock. And then I would chase at 7 o'clock and for 8 o'clock to update and sort of flake and form it. So it was a lot of work. I have to work to eat. I have a job that I have to do from 9 to 5 roughly. And then and I'm not trying to flatter myself because not nearly on the scale, but like the other people that you've heard from this afternoon, I'm an activist in my community, which means I go to meetings at night. We knock on doors to get signatures on petitions. We try to organize people. And so I end up with 20-hour days very often, too often. So if someone had come along, in the spirit of, fraternity, solidarity, and said to me, I would love to do the news, train me, I'll wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning for a period of time, or we will, I would have kissed them every which way. Paid them if I could afford to, knocked off a liquor store to pay them, whatever. Instead, what happened was I was fired by the people from California who came here, who, by the way, I would like to ask what communities they're connected to on the ground. Like if they lost their jobs, where are they organizing and working? And I was replaced by someone who otherwise I would be willing to work with under that condition, instead of coming in essentially as a quisling, as a comprador, to enable the continuation of the morning show with this new management. They're a mask for this new management. That's Gail Walker, and I'm sorry to say this, but it's true. So we have to look at not just who's on the air now, but where Bill started before. Under what conditions are they willing to stay on the air without taking a stand? And for people who are doing it because it's their living, there's maybe something there. There are a few people that are getting paid that may not have another job. And so In my opinion, if you have to stay there, you're looking for another job quickly and looking for some bang on the way out. For others who are volunteers, you have to ask then, is their role on the station connected to some external movement or some community that's absolutely essential that primes this basically otherwise lack of display of principle and lack of solidarity with people like Bernard and others who have, like Mimi, people who have been doing work for decades in this city and, for the people. And I can't see that connection for the large majority of people who are producers at wbai who have said nothing, while one after another has been turned out, kicked to the curb, in favor of people who weren't even from New York, let alone from any community in New York, and or really of any community anywhere. So I wanted to start with that. This past week, Cynthia McKinney, who most of you know, has been on her second mission to Gaza to bring supplies to the people of Gaza. Gaza was bombed into the Stone Age by Israel over a 27-day campaign at the end of December, beginning of January this year. The 1.5 million people that live in Gaza have no food generally. Their crops were burned. Their fields were burned by the Israelis. The hospitals are non-functional. The main hospital in Gaza City was bombed. What, phosphorus, and it devastated. There's no medical supplies, and there is nothing that can come in to Gaza unless it comes through Israel with their permission or through Egypt with Israel's permission. That's the situation facing 1.5 million people right now. Cynthia McKinney, and I'm not putting her above a movement, there's a movement, the Free Gaza movement, and other people associated with other movements who have been trying to, on the ground, remedy the situation by bringing supplies into Gaza to break the blockade. Cynthia McKinney I bring up because she's there now, and because, by the way, she's back after her boat was rammed by the Israeli Navy and fired upon by them the last time she went. When that happened, we reported on it. As a matter of fact, we were the first to report on it in the United States. That was on Wake Up Call. So, this week, on Tuesday morning, I interviewed Cynthia and Greta Berlin from the Free Gaza movement. They are in, still, as the last report, I've lost an internet connection, so I don't know if it's changed, in Cyprus on their way to Gaza with supplies. The supplies that McKinney brought with her, children's supplies, coloring books, crayons, writing materials and such. But the key the key commodity that they're bringing with them this time that's of critical importance is about 30 tons of cement, concrete, which is to be used to rebuild the hospital in Gaza City so that it can begin to function. Now, I'll repeat, nothing gets in or out of Gaza unless it is either through Israel or through Egypt with the Israelis' permission. Cement, concrete, is prohibited as an import item into Gaza by the Israelis under the pretext that it can be used to build bunkers. However, you can buy concrete, if you're in Gaza, from Israel for about 10 times the retail cost. Also, you can buy food in Gaza from Israel at about 10 times the retail cost. This is after the agricultural sector was devastated by 27 days of bombing. So this group going to Gaza this past week were going with 2 boats, and one of which had 30 tons of concrete for the hospital. I forwarded the interview that I did, and I stayed out of it. It was about 22 minutes long of sound. But I introduced the beginning and the end and stayed out of it so that my band voice wouldn't contaminate it for the purposes of wbai, Pacifica, Free Speech Radio News, and Democracy Now! Using it. And then I forwarded it to all of those outlets. In addition to that, Cynthia has been forwarding dispatches on a daily, actually twice a day lately, detailing what's been going on. And what that is essentially this. Rather than bombing the boat or ramming it like they did last time, the Israelis found themselves on CNN and in a bad way, public relations-wise. So this time what they have done is dictate to the Cypriots not to allow them to disembark from Cyprus, with the warning that if they did, they would be blown out of the water. That's a direct quote from an official on the ground there, relating what he was told by an IDF official. Now, when they left, Cynthia McKinney sent a fax to President Obama, to the U.S. Department of State, and to the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and notified them, A, this is what we're bringing, as did the Free Gaza movement, but this is a 6-term congressional representative communicating to the United States government this fact. And this is Cynthia McKinney communicating to Barack Obama this fact. I will be on this boat. This is what we're bringing. It's been inspected. We will be departing from Cyprus for Gaza. In any event, the Israelis felt emboldened enough, regardless of that condition and the fact that Obama himself issued a press release 3 days ago saying that the embargo should be lifted or at least modified and materials like concrete should be permitted into Gaza. Nevertheless, the Israelis were emboldened enough to tell Cyprus, if you let them go, we're going to blow them out of the water. In other words, to threaten to murder a 6-term congressional representative and, by the way, 2 boatloads of people trying to bring relief to the 1.5 million people that suffered a month's worth of bombing at the hands of the same military, by the way, which is funded by the government here, and those checks are signed by President Barack Obama. I forwarded materials from the Gaza movement and from Mrs. McKinney to wbai 3 times this week, including sound, to Democracy Now!, including a link to sound, to Free Speech Radio News, and I heard nothing. I listened to Pacifica, I went to the links on the stations and listened in the archives. I heard nothing on Democracy Now!, and I heard nothing on wbai. That's the first thing. I'm going to give you one more example and come to the point, and I apologize, I'm going in a circle to get there. The big story before Farrah Fawcett and then Michael Jackson this week in the press was the Iranian election. And the consensus view, even on the left, was that the election was rigged. There's a distinction between the incumbent president and the insurgent candidate, who's a former prime minister, with the claim or the hint being that one is with the religious fundamentalist program and the other Western or more of or less religious program, and that there is a people's movement on the ground that is rebelling against the existing condition. And consequently, the conclusion, even among the left, is that, or among many on the left, is that this should be supported. The United States should stay out of it. Those who are wiser say, because it'll actually incite resentment among the Iranian people who have reason to feel that based on the history between the United States and Iran. But on the ground, basically the facts are that the people are rising up against this fundamentalist government and that should be supported, at least here. So, before I saw the son of the Shah all over CNN on Tuesday making exactly the same argument, the son of Savak, the son of all that happened in Iran from 1953 until 1979, I thought, gee, it would be real interesting just for exercise, an intellectual exercise, to interview some people who were around during the presidential election and find out what they thought. Maybe somebody that speaks Farsi, maybe someone that's actually lived in Iran. And so I found 2 people, actually among the circle of activists that I work with, who happened to spend 2 months in advance of the election in Iran. They saw the presidential debates. They have the political and social context to understand what was going on. They are very sharp-minded and very analytical people. I know this from their other work, where I've worked with them on housing issues and a million things up in Westchester County. And as it turned out, they were having a presentation at Westpac Monday evening, and they had a speaker from the University of Maryland who is of Iranian descent, who also speaks Farsi, who was monitoring the election, who watches Iranian media, and who, by the way, it's her discipline, Iranian politics. So I interviewed them for 30 minutes via Skype on Monday morning. And I learned some very interesting facts. Number one, the election, if one were to believe the debate between Mousavi and Ahmadinejad and several other candidates, was over whether or not the economy should be privatized, as it was in the process of doing when Mousavi was prime minister, or if the public sector should be expanded, as has happened since Ahmadinejad took office. As it turns out, during Mousavi's term, there was a large privatization of the Iranian economy, and as a matter of fact, apparently some of the people here thought he was such a useful instrument for that he's a registered agent of Halliburton in acquiring parts of the Iranian economy. Under Ahmadinejad, the first publicly constructed and funded housing was built during his term. The public sector in the rural areas and public support for agriculture expanded by 3 to 4 times. We're talking about a short period of time. And alternatively, what Mousavi was promising to do was return to the privatization. So they explained to me that on the ground, you have middle class and upper middle class who benefited from the privatization efforts, and that was the basis of support for Mousavi, and that you had working people in the cities and the people in the rural areas who supported Ahmadinejad because they were benefiting from it. Now, I saw an inkling of this in the press in the last few days, finally. I don't know if it was just leaking out somehow or what these facts were there, or someone had to harmonize what's been said with these facts that exist and that will come out sooner or later. And that was that in the final run-up, that Ahmadinejad was running around doing what, not that they do it here, handing out what's basically called pork here, or member items, or whatever, which we cover a lot at BAI now, by the way. There was a big check ceremony the other day with one of the congressional representatives, $250,000 to Lower East Side Girls Club. Admirable, all of that. If that's a sum total of a congressional representative's career, however, we're not doing very well. Long story short, there's a whole other angle to what's going on in Iran, and the coverage has been on BAI. Might as well have been just run tape from the Shah's son Tuesday morning on CNN. There's been that much analysis at all, and this goes also for Free Speech Radio News. So there's something that's going on, not only in terms of personnel changes to make a political sort of environment happen on BAI, it's already been accomplished. That's already been accomplished. If I weren't fired on June 1st, then this interview that I did with these people would have aired on Monday. Like I said, it was almost 30 minutes. Maybe Sharon would have broken it up. But people in New York and the metropolitan area that listen to BAI, and maybe even someone at some of the other stations, because that has happened, would have said, gee, there's another perspective. There's a total unity of opinion from right to left, Fox to CNN to NPR to WBAI about what's going on in Iran. Here's some people that were there and here's what they had to say. Useful information. So bring it to here. Columbia University has a radio station. And Columbia University has a real estate portfolio. And Columbia University has a pocket full of politicians. WBAI could be instrumental in helping both the organization here that's happened with Nellie and the community fighting this project here, linking up with other struggles like that in the city. I've seen that happen here. I've seen Dan Goldstein here from Destroy Don't Develop Brooklyn, Nellie's guest. I've seen people, I'm here myself. I fought these same struggles up in Westchester County. We fought Starrett City up in Westchester County when they took a Mitchell Lama project private 3 years ago. There are no other places to go. Up in Westchester County, there's News 12, which is like NY1, and there's the Journal News, which is like all of the dailies here combined. It's the only daily in Westchester County. There's a public relations firm called Thompson and Bender. Thompson and Bender and Mrs. Thompson, who was Elizabeth Bracken, are all former senior editors of the Journal News. They now own a public relations firm. That public relations firm is the largest ad buyer from News 12. As a matter of fact, they buy something like 80% of the advertising from Cablevision in Westchester County. So when a developer hires Thompson and Bender, their motto is connected and respected. They essentially buy silence in the local media over gentrification, real estate swindles, the entire gamut of things that we face on the ground in our everyday lives, and there is no alternative. There was WBAI, and now there's nothing. And if we don't take back WBAI, there will be nothing, and that which we've been able to stitch together over the last few years is going to fall apart. And we can't let that happen. I'm not going to let it happen, and I hope you won't either. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is in California, and hopefully this is going to work. And hopefully he's still there because I'm about an hour behind schedule. But Fernando Velasquez is a news producer who created and hosts a program called Informativo Pacifica on the West Coast out of KPFK. That's carried here at was carried here, I don't know if it still is because I don't listen anymore, at WBAI. Bernard White brought that here. He has been dismissed from his job, and I'm going to see if I can't get him on the phone to tell you a little bit about what he's faced. Let's see. So maybe if someone wants to talk while I try to reach him. Maybe I can talk if you want.
Yeah, you can name it.
Fernando Velasquez. Yeah, do you want to talk?